something later on or check back in, you're more than welcome to do so. We'll send that out in the follow-up resources as well. Um, Now, speaking of chat, we've kind of discussed those logistics a little bit. Before we turn it over to the content, I'd really love to get to know who's in the room. So if you're comfortable, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, your name, where you're joining from, and what brought you to the session today. Speaking of the chat, I'd love to see those coming through. First, I'll introduce myself to get us kicked off. So my name is Grace Litsu. I use the she series of pronouns. I'm based in Chicago, so if you hear any rattling of the windows, it's because it's the very windy day today here. And I'm doing my best to stay cozy, as I'm sure many are across the country today. At Taproot, I'm a manager on our pro bono services team, and my role involves all things volunteer community, but also supporting just pro bono in general, and trying to really live up to our value of making capacity building support as widely available as possible, and encouraging the pro bono ethic across all professional fields. And I'm really passionate about bringing together people and fostering relationships, which is one of my favorite parts of my role at Taproot. And events like this are one of those examples of how we get to do just that. So again, encourage you to, I see people dropping in their introductions. Thank you, Joshua. I see that we have the NYS Association of Conservation Commissions, Lois Arnold, Laura George, people from all across. Definitely feel free to, if you see someone, connect in the chat there. We love to see that community space coming to life. After this webinar, you'll also have my email, so my door is always open if you ever need any support. I would love to move us now. Our first, I want to take a moment, again, as I said, to introduce our panelists. We'll go into a little bit of a deep dive into Taproot before we open up the floor to our panelists. But just to give you a little bit of a preview before I invite each panelist to introduce themselves in greater depth, I wanted to give an introduction here. We are joined today by our first pair, which is led by the lovely Rebecca Trammell from the nonprofit side. Rebecca is a community organizer in Wilmington, North Carolina, with an organization called Community Conversations. And she'll share more about what that's about. But Rebecca is focused on addressing challenges in her community's public schools. And she's a deeply passionate leader who has turned her passion into civic engagement. So we'll open the floor for that in a couple minutes here. She partnered with Elizabeth Doherty, who's joining us. She's the Senior Director of Marketing and Communications at Mercy Housing in Denver. And they worked on a marketing project together, which we'll dive into. And our next pair is represented by Jean Gerhardt Cyrus. That was part of our technical challenges this morning. We're still working on making sure Jean is able to join, but she is the co-founder and former executive director of Opt-in Kiana, which stands for One Positive Thing Every Day, and is an incredible youth organization in Kiana, Alaska. So hopefully we'll be able to get her on as we're moving into the panel, but if not, we're joined by her counterpart, Katya Keston, who's an AmeriCorps volunteer in Maine and teaches class in the rural Down East. So we'll get to hear from her to represent the work that the two of them were able to do together. But before we do so, I just wanted to give us a little bit of context about Taproot so that we're on the same page. So as you might know, Taproot is a nonprofit ourselves, and we exist to serve our fellow nonprofits. Taproot was founded as a nonprofit in 2001 with the knowledge that there's a massive resource gap that's present in the social sector. So organizations that have solutions to the world's most pressing problems and are supporting their communities daily are often understaffed, under-resourced, and might not have the capacity to carry out their missions to their fullest extent. And so our purpose through our work is to make sure that access to support is widely available and available on demand, regardless of mission area, budget size, or years in operation of the nonprofit requesting support. And our vehicle for support is pro bono consulting. So this is a professional form of volunteering, and we'll get into what that looks like. Taproot is really focused on providing this support in three main buckets. So Taproot Plus is what we mentioned at the top. That's our on-demand open access platform where nonprofits can post request supports and volunteers can apply to provide support. And this is probably the bucket that you're most familiar with, but it's not all that Taproot does. This is our way of providing access to anyone who comes to us. We have opportunities for sessions, which are 1-hour consultations, and then also the multi-week projects, which is what we'll dive a little bit deeper into today. But this is kind of our front door into pro bono through our website. Our second bucket that our work falls under is our advisory services practice. So to fuel our work of creating connections between dedicated volunteers and social good organizations, Taproot partners with forward-thinking companies and grant makers to develop custom skills-based volunteer programs. So this is kind of a higher touch offering, and since 2001, our founding, Taproot's advisory services team has collaborated with countless Fortune 500 companies and other organizations to make sure we're matching the expertise of their employees with nonprofits who need their support. So this is kind of our way of doing this work in another capacity, and it also allows us to continue opening the doors on our Taproot Plus side. And then our third bucket is really that field building. So Taproot is a nonprofit dedicated to serving our other fellow nonprofits, as we've mentioned. And part of this involves changing hearts and minds and making it so that every nonprofit has access to professional infrastructure and resources. And so that means conducting regular volunteerism and nonprofit sector surveys so that we're really in tune with what the needs are and how we can best fit them. And this just really is our research arm of our process here. These are the three main buckets that we kind of offer support within. So you'll see across our website, you'll kind of see these three ways present. Now, I've mentioned what pro bono, the pro bono umbrella, and under that pro bono umbrella, we talk about skills-based volunteering. So I wanted to just get us on the same page of what that is, and maybe for folks who aren't familiar with this as a form of service, we can define it a little bit. So if you've received any communication from Taproot, you've probably seen pro bono, you've probably seen skills-based volunteering language. And you might be familiar with this term because it is really well established in other fields such as the legal field. But Taproot really recognizes that every volunteer, every professional has unique skills that they could offer. And there's nonprofits everywhere who could utilize that support. So it's really about making it as widely utilized in every field and making sure that those nonprofits are able to access that support. So skills-based volunteering offers many benefits both to nonprofits and volunteers. For nonprofits, working with skilled volunteers can fill experience gaps, give them more tools to do the things they're uniquely great at. We'll hear from our panelists to kind of identify some of these buckets in greater detail. It is also a way to build lasting connections. This is honestly one of my favorite parts of the Taproot kind of relationship process. When you get connected with a volunteer or a nonprofit, there is a mutual exchange of knowledge that really can extend a relationship beyond that initial Taproot Plus engagement. So while it's not required, we've heard lots of stories of volunteers becoming advocates, donors, board members, even staff members. So it's a great way to build really lasting connections and extend your network. It also just can't be understated just how impactful skills-based volunteering can be. So beyond sharing valuable expertise that contributes to the sustainable growth of an organization, it also has a really tangible financial value. So Taproot has been able to establish that the average hourly benefit of a donation of time and talent is $220. So this can go a really long way to support a resource-strapped organization, and that's what they might have to pay if they were to bring in that support in another format. So there are lots of ways that this can be helpful to the organization, and this is just kind of a brief overview of what that looks like. If you're a numbers person, sometimes I am. It's nice to see the kind of by the numbers for the volunteers here. So this is across our foundation. We've engaged over 40,000 volunteers in our programming, whether that's through advisory services or on our Taproot Plus platform. And these volunteers have collectively contributed to an incredible number of hours and that value across all kinds of organizations. So this is just a testament to our commitment to mobilizing these passionate individuals, and also to show you that for the nonprofit side, we kind of have that equivalent by the numbers here. Again, every organization who's a 501c3 or has an equivalent charity status or is fiscally sponsored is eligible. So we kind of cover budget area, social cause area, whatever your mission is. We're here to serve all of it. So that's more of a background about Taproot, getting everyone on the same page in terms of what it is that we do, and how we do it. I see that there is lots in the chat, and I encourage you to keep that coming. In case there are any questions, I did want to call out that we will have some time at the end to address questions. I know there were some that were pre-submitted, and we'll bring some of those to our panelists as well. And on that note, I would love to move us into the heart of our conversation today. And I invite our panelists that have joined to come off mute and off camera here, and we'll go ahead and get started with that conversation. So as they're doing that, I see Rebecca is here. We'll go ahead and give them a second to make their way to that main screen, and we'll pull down the slides. As everyone else is coming into the room, Rebecca, I'm going to go ahead and, since you were the first one off there, I'll pass the floor to you just to give us more of an overarching introduction. I probably didn't do it full justice. So, Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you guys today. I am from Wilmington, North Carolina, where I started the Community Conversations Advocacy Group. I learned that still in 2018, my community was struggling with separate and unequal schools. It was a shock to me. I was like, how is this happening? And so in 2019, it was really apparent that kids were getting hurt and something had to be done. And our community came together and we put together this list of corrective actions that we wanted our school board to embrace and to address systemic issues in our school system. And that's why we started calling ourselves Community Conversations, because we were having community conversations about what needed to change. And we put together a list of recommendations that we called the collective statement. And we soon realized that even if our community wanted to take action on these things, they couldn't because they didn't have the money. But the state of North Carolina actually owes $5.54 billion to our public schools, and none of us knew that. And so I took the advocacy from a small little advocacy group in Wilmington, North Carolina, to a statewide initiative called I Am Leandro, because there's a case called Leandro versus North Carolina. And in Leandro versus North Carolina, the state of North Carolina was required by the North Carolina Supreme Court to release $5.54 billion into our public schools. And what was so amazing was that the exact recommendations that we had presented to our school's local school board, there was a plan called the Leandro Plan, and it had already been written, it had already been researched, and we just needed the state of North Carolina to know what we knew. We needed the state of North Carolina to realize that there is a plan, that there is a budget, and there is a court order that orders fully funded schools, and it orders a sound basic education for every child. And we didn't have, just because we just started, we didn't have the capacity to lift off a whole initiative by ourselves. And so I reached out to Taproot and I said, I need some help. And they've been helping me in various ways ever since.
That's such an amazing story, Rebecca. It always is so inspiring to hear your passion come through as you're sharing about community conversations, and love that you turned to us to support a resilient, small, volunteer-led organization for some extra support. And you worked with Elizabeth, who is also on the line here. Elizabeth, would you like to come off and introduce yourself and how you came to Taproot?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Elizabeth Doherty. I have spent the last 17 years of my career in mission-driven communications and marketing, and the last 10 years in the nonprofit space. And I found Taproot during a time when I was between roles. My job had been eliminated, and I felt like applying for jobs was not really improving the world in any measurable way. And so I was just looking to keep my skills sharp, to do something that made me still feel good about the world. And so I actually applied for a job at Taproot, and then I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'll check this out. So I applied for the job and then went straight to the Taproot site and signed up to find some opportunities to volunteer, and found Rebecca and her organization. And it was like very interesting to learn that this was happening in North Carolina. I live in Denver. I've never even been to North Carolina. But I am a parent and I have 2 kids in public school. And so it was a way to support Rebecca and her goals and do something that felt really good for the world, and use my skills while I was, trying to find my next adventure. So
That's so wonderful to hear, and thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your kind of bravery in sharing about what brought you to Taproot. I think others on the line from the volunteer side might also be in a tough job search market, looking for some ways to feel like they're finding meaning and keeping skills sharp. So thank you for sharing that background. I'm so glad it brought you to Rebecca. It's such a wonderful partnership. And yes, wonderful. And I'm so excited to be able to highlight your partnership too. But I wanted to also pass it to Katya. It looks like Jean might not be able to join us today, but Katya worked with Jean from Opt-in. So Katya, if you're able to share a little bit about Opt-in, but also yourself, and how you came to Taproot.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Wave your hand if it goes quiet. Yes. It was about 2 years ago now, maybe a year ago, that at the time I was in Central Alaska, and I knew that I was in search to help rural places, but Alaska's kind of third world on its own, and little did I know there would be one project where Jean, who's the prior executive director, would operate. So I made a connection, and I was just hopeful that it was a good fit, where I was pretty novice at the kind of graphic design necessary, but I had experience and academia in some communications, especially agriculture. So that involves youth and such kind of subsistent activities. So what I did find I'll do a little introduction for her, and I'm sorry if you hear a pet. Their goal was to establish a youth space in a village that had very few resources, and the budget's usually pretty tight when you get into the bush where you have to fly into these villages. So I definitely had a heart for her project, the patience to want to see it through, and it was also intimate to me to have been pretty nearby, just a flight away. Their approach was quite grassroots, so they didn't quite have a model, but they began with the need. Jean was a teacher, so there was a need for after-school care and activities to enrich in the lives of the students. Not everyone has parents who graduate when you get into very rural places, so it began to be leadership. I think they had a youth conference that happens in Anchorage, like the hub of Alaska where everyone flies in. So they meant to too. So they got to fundraise, and then pull together resources. And it began really small. So I could give examples, but I think that's fair for an introduction on what they did. And I look forward to being able to share a little bit of the how and the why and pros and advice if we can get to that point. And here I am in Maine, so now I actually do some of that clear across the country in a very rural place, Washington County. It's known as the lowest income one in Maine. So it's not too far off to get to know so many different types of ways to make a living.
That's incredible, and thank you, Katya, also for being open about your growing the skill. You had a little bit of background in graphic design, but you were like, I want to grow this, and you're passionate about the work that Jean was doing. Seems like it transferred very well to what you're doing currently.
Yeah, specialize in it. Yep.
Amazing. Well, thank you for representing Opt-in as well. There's a lot of overlap between Opt-in and the work that Rebecca does in terms of working with our youth and being their advocates. So I was really excited to partner with both of them. And I want to pass it back to Rebecca. You talked a little bit about what motivated you to reach out to Taproot in terms of needing just a little bit of extra support. But I would love to kind of have you walk us through the process of how you decided what project to post, and if maybe you had any particular needs in mind, how did you prioritize them? Walk me through what that looked like.
So we launched a project called I Am Leandro because the case that we're working on to raise awareness for is called Leandro versus North Carolina. And in that case, the North Carolina Supreme Court ordered the General Assembly to release $5.54 billion into our public schools. The case has been ruled on 4 times, and every single time they rule that that the state of North Carolina owes the money, that we've chronically underfunded our schools. It has been properly adjudicated over and over and over again, and we can't go any further with it in the court of law. This case has to be taken to the court of public opinion. And I knew that Leandro needed to be a household name and a voting issue. Otherwise, it's never going to get funded. So what needs to happen? A communication strategy. And people have to see themselves as stakeholders in public education. People have to see themselves as, in essence, plaintiffs in this case. And so how do I translate this 30-year-old case into sound bites? I was like, I need a communications specialist to take everything that I have in my head, put it into bite-sized pieces, and then spoon feed it to the public. And so I reached out to Taproot to find a PR specialist, a communications specialist who could do that work. And so I wanted to have, I wanted to be able to address an interdisciplinary or introduce an interdisciplinary conversation to North Carolina. I wanted to attract people who are not necessarily your everyday activists, people who may not normally get involved in these kind of things, because I wanted people to know, hey guys, our democracy is on the line. Our system of government is on the line. We have an unaccountable legislature. who won't listen to the courts. We have a lot of silence when we need to have a lot of talking. We need to understand the economic impact of what happens when 68% of your kids cannot read and they are not on track for college or career. So we need to have one message that goes to our economic development community, and another message that perhaps goes to our religious community, and another message that goes to our legal community, and another message that goes to our education community. Who can do that? A comm specialist. And so I reached out to Taproot and I said, help a sister out. I need different talking points to go to different people. And thank God Elizabeth Doherty answered the call.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue, Elizabeth, into what was your side of that? Like, when you came across Rebecca's posting, how did you know it was a good fit? And do you have any details to add about what that need, how it was described?
Yeah, I mean, I in my previous roles and my skill set is relatively like broad. I've done a lot of things. I've worn a lot of hats, but communications and messaging and distilling messaging into bite-sized, like understandable, sort of nuggets, if you will, is one of the things I find to be the most fun. And before I got into the marketing field, I actually had a background in politics from undergrad. And so when I saw this ask and I learned about I Am Leandro, it like just the way Rebecca wrote the post, it was very organized. It was very clear what she was looking for. It was exciting and compelling in terms of like what the, the cause and the need was. And I said, well, hey, I would love to meet her and hear more about this and see if I can help. I've done the messaging, like how can I help take it? Like exactly what Rebecca said, like she had it all in her head. So I learned a lot from her about, public organizing and, taking a message that is like rooted in justice and also finding ways to like appeal to the other motivations of different groups like the business community. So for me, I don't really think of myself as like a PR person. I'm more of like a brand messaging person. So for me, it also felt like, hey, I can do this. It's a little bit of a stretch too. I haven't done a PR toolkit in a really long time. So how can I, brush on my skill set too as I'm trying, new technologies, trying new methods in service of something really important as I'm sort of, in this liminal space in my career.
Yeah, that's such interesting context. I think I really love, Elizabeth, that you mentioned finding something fun. You enjoy doing the messaging and helping people find those communication nuggets, as you mentioned. But it's not just about kind of the looking for things that you are passionate about and how that comes through in the project descriptions, but also ways maybe where it can stretch a little bit, and you can use those skills in a different way. And so I think that's a really wonderful way to bring in Katya too, since you kind of were looking for ways to stretch your skills or demonstrate your skills in that graphic design project. Do you want to maybe describe or walk us through a little bit more about the project you worked with Jean on?
Yes, definitely. Okay. Okay. It's on.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. It could be the lag here. The project that began as this after school teacher kind of spearheaded idea became this idea to have the students kind of run the place and choose what offerings there are, do the fundraisers, and help write grants. So I came in at the 10-year mark, and they had this idea to create a banner. So as some place that is grassroots, as you can imagine, there was a lot of focus on what was accountable because of what it took just to incorporate. However, it made me have to also think outside the box, where what I did was go onto their social media from the beginning of the timeline and literally transfer it to a place I could snip and see what went on. Any kind of course, accolades or milestones. And the idea was to create a banner, and hopefully it was one more that could be like a one-pager. That's a nonprofit term for what explains how things, what goes on, but also a banner that could be printed out professionally for an event. So that was the project, and it took a few platforms to test out to see how would you do that. Would you do separate pages of different topics, or make it a slideshow so it could become a PDF? Things that could be simple if you're a professional, but what I did think was good was you could look at her likes and different events to change anything from the colors, like you mentioned a brand, without when we were kind of able to make one. And it did take quite some time because it's intense in different parts. The selection of the medium, the content to be able to research, and then of course the presentation to make sure it fits all the boxes. But I think it went well, especially since we were able to communicate to a place where we could flex and admit if things didn't look right, and before they got too far in the project to be able to backstep a little and create a language over it. So it was kind of a narrative all on its own, just to keep in contact with our mentor, to see how the vision of what this would be came from just a seed to what it became.
That's incredible. And it sounds like for Jean, being able to share the rich history of her organization over time was a big piece of what that project was trying to accomplish.
You could call it too a little bit of cultural preservation, where that might be lost in translation sometimes far away where things are oral. That was also a good point.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing also that, there was some trial and error and kind of a back and forth process. I think that's really important to call out. And I'm sure, Rebecca and Elizabeth, that was part of your partnership as well. How I think trust and creating trust as you start to work together is a really big part of this process as you're kind of working towards a project deliverable that you're creating together, because ultimately it is co-created. How did you navigate those different communication challenges between the two of you and some of that trust building as you got started working together?
I'll let Elizabeth start first.
Okay. I mean, I guess Rebecca can confirm or deny this, but I think for me, like, building trust starts with listening and really understanding, as a marketer and a messaging person, like, the most important thing is the root of like who Rebecca is, what the organization is about, why, asking questions, hearing all of her passion, and then being able to kind of organize it and present it back in a way that like validates, like, okay, I heard you, here's the things that I'm hearing, here's what I've learned from you. And so for us, it was a back and forth. It was like I would hear from her, then I would kind of take a crack at it and then send it to her, and she would change things that weren't quite right or like edit things, and I was able to learn her voice and learn, like, when it comes to political advocacy, and a lot of nonprofits, like, there's things you have to be careful about what you say and how you say them. So learning those things, I think, was really important. And I think like there was a bit of the personal side too, just like getting to know each other as people, like why it mattered, why, like her background and why she was doing this work, why this work felt like important to me as well. It was, I think, I don't know, it felt like our first meeting, a lot of it was vibes. You can say, Rebecca, if you agree, but it was just like, okay, yeah, this is going to work. Like, we understand each other. We have like a common thread that we can work through. So I don't know if there's any, you can call me a liar if you want in front of 140 people. I won't mind.
I would say that trust like with Elizabeth began with reading her bio, her resume, and a little bit of cyber stalking. Like, yeah, I went to her LinkedIn, I saw what she had done. And I was like, this, before I even scheduled the appointment, I was like, she's got the skills, she's got the goods. And, the first meeting really confirmed that this is a very talented communicator, and she can deliver on what I'm asking for. So I had a lot of confidence in her professional capacity. And then I met her and talked with her, and I was like, please say yes. Like, I was like, I hope she gets off this call and feels as excited as I do. So
I did.
it was definitely a vibe test or a vibe thing. Like in the fall, it was just like, okay, we match each other's energy here. And I could tell from Elizabeth's story and her activities that she wants to see the world become a better place. And while she could be sitting there feeling sorry for herself, crying in her Cheerios, like thinking about how am I going to get another job? No, she was like, I have confidence that I'm going to get another one. And so much so that I have time to give you. And, in that time that she chose to wisely invest the time that she had to make a difference. And that's the kind of person that I have seen come through Taproot. I have had 3 amazing Taproot volunteers. So much, I was like, please don't leave, but I have to. But like, I was like, I wish that, I could keep you as part of my team, but like, we don't have money. There's no money in what I do. I don't do this because I'm independently wealthy. I do this because I'm passionate about making a difference. And I do hope that my work gets fully funded so I could hire an Elizabeth. I would love to be able to hire Elizabeth and Kay and other people who have come my way through Taproot. But thank goodness I can at least access their talent for when I need it the most. And what ended up happening is we created these talking points, and now it's part of my toolkit that I give to people, to other leaders. And this past weekend, I led a conference. I was invited by the superintendent of Iredell Statesville Schools. It's like a little rural community. Am I getting too far ahead? Okay. So I led we launched the I Am Leandro Advocate program just Sunday afternoon. And again, we were invited by the superintendent of the schools. It was a stacked room. The mayor was there. Representatives were there from the North Carolina General Assembly who did not agree with me. That's fine. I want to talk to them. There were people on both sides that agreed with me and did not agree with me. But by the time they left, they were like, one of them came to me and said, I do support North Carolina putting vouchers in private schools. But I also believe now, because of this presentation, that we must fund Leandro. It is wrong to defund public schools while we're funding private schools. And I was like, I will take that. And let's keep the conversation going. And part of the advocate training program, it's not just a presentation. It's not just the panel discussion they have. Now we're going to take it further, and they can have access to a toolkit. And in that toolkit are the talking points. The talking points go straight to the people who have gone through the advocate training so they can better tell their friends. And so we're going to keep this conversation going, but that's the kind of systemic change work that happened because of our program and because of the project that Elizabeth and I did together.
That's so incredible. I so appreciate you sharing the tangible impact, right? Like you have experienced the project come to life in the work that you continue to do, Rebecca. And so I think, I hope folks on the line understand that the impact is really, truly meaningful. And I want to invite Katya, if you have anything else to add about that trust piece or what you did with Jean to really narrow in on the work that you were doing as you got started working together.
I'm on. Okay. For the most part, prior to this project, I had been in kitchens, so I was very into detail orientation, compliance, And that's what attracts me to nonprofits too. You get to see the whole scope. So not just be at the back end or the front end, but get to see with feedback, especially from those you serve. And so it actually meant a lot to see her direct ties to the youth and what I call is the service demographic. To me, that really helped me see how articulation and accountability can be much higher than what I was accustomed to, where production is the number one goal. So it kind of was able to tone it down. But what I think experience gives in any kind of industry or maybe any kind of role might be that trust. So you trust your work pays forward, not backwards, or just that what you do with care. And so I think the adaptability between us lies in her ability to be very culturally sensitive with the ethics, which I never really had a chance to do. I was really driven on production and numbers or what's in front of you. So to look deeper into the roots of things, Taproot, I guess, really made a difference. To have that conversation made me feel like that managerial level wasn't so far flung than where we might come from, and especially even third world nonprofits that really scrape together everyone's effort and brings in lots of craft to figure out how to serve their niche. So I heard toolkit, and I also feel what I felt could earn trust was to create what I did so it could pass on adaptable, like use a platform that is easy for youth to understand and learn, or make it interpretive in a language that youth or anyone else could use ahead. So I also made sure to research data and make that navigable in a spreadsheet rather than just kind of throw it into a Word document. I think these things seem just like desk work, but I feel you get to depart from your project with that sense that you left it better than you found it. Any kind of trace of you was the same or better.
Yeah. Thank you so much for adding that. I think you mentioned there's so many nuggets in what you just shared. You talked about some transferable skills from the experience you have in the past, and how working with Jean kind of helped you feel maybe a little bit more comfortable and trust that the work you're doing is meaningful, and that you're giving something not just to be used in the meantime, but something that can be adapted and utilized over time, as Jean continued her work, which I also saw through Elizabeth, the work you did with Rebecca. As we start to transition into opening the floor to questions, there's so many that have come through in the chat, and I have some colleagues on the line that hopefully have been able to address some. If not, we will make sure to follow up if there's any pressing questions. But as we do that transition, I wanted to pose one last question to you all, and that's just our advice for first timers. So if you had a little nugget for people who are just getting started with Taproot, what would you tell them to really get them into the next step? And Elizabeth, I'll pass it to you to start.
Okay. Advice for other volunteers or nonprofits or both?
Let's do both.
Okay. I mean, I would say my advice for nonprofits is make sure that the scope of your project is really clear. I think someone asked, like, did we have a contract or like an agreement on deliverables? That was all in the very first project. So before I even went in to the conversation with Rebecca, I knew the scope I was getting into. So I would just say, like a lot of times when you're a small nonprofit, you're strapped, you're like, I need all of the things. I think Rebecca, not to like steal your thunder, your advice, but like has been very successful in like chunking the work out based on like the skill set and sort of like projects, and then the relationship can expand from there, but you sort of start with very clear. For volunteers, I would say like go on Taproot and look at what floats your boat and then apply. Like why not try it? Like it may not be a good fit, but at least you get to meet amazing people. Like even if you just have one conversation, like where I'm sitting in the world right now, like I'm hearing a lot of things that are sad and bad that make me mad, not to be a Dr. Seuss about it, but like getting to talk to someone like Rebecca or the other nonprofit that I worked with, also in North Carolina, it just made me go, oh my gosh, look at all these people who are trying to make the world a better place. Like I'm not isolated, I'm not alone. Like people are moving things and making things happen, and that is super empowering and just delightful. So that's my advice.
That's wonderful. And I also love the selfishly from the volunteer side. It might look intimidating, but it's low risk. Jump in,
Yeah.
try it out, and see what happens. Really
Yep.
appreciate that advice. Rebecca, I'll pass it to you to share any advice you have for our volunteers and nonprofits.
I would say make sure that your project is very clear and organized. And I 100% use ChatGPT. And I also ran it by Taproot, like the Taproot project coordinator. And they helped me define the project further, and he gave me a lot of suggestions. And so the reason why I had a very clear project to put out there to the world was because I worked at it. And so for the nonprofits out there, work on your project description, make sure it's something that's going to make an impact, and clarify your ask with the Taproot Foundation before you post it. That's where I have found that we've gotten the most traction.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think Jen just mentioned in the chat as well, you can scope your project with a volunteer. So if you need some support and narrowing in on that idea, that's where those 1 hour sessions can be really helpful. But I love that. Work at it. You don't need to post the first thing, and there are resources to help. Thank you for sharing that advice. Katya, let's close it out with you. Any advice that you have?
Well, yes, and just to check in again, we were very rural, so weather and access to internet, I guess those things, timelines were okay. We weren't in totally different time zones, but because of such variables and how it's virtual, and that sometimes the experience level is not quite what you would find in the mid-range of the field that you seek assistance in, then maybe budget extra time, whether it's just to have more one-on-ones, maybe keep notes or a live document where you can communicate, or just test it out. Don't feel timid to try new modalities. And then I think literacy of their background. I think I've done more than one project, and I found that later to learn about their project kind of makes you have to go back sometimes. I don't know if this is with all, but if it's like grants or design, it really helps to be kind of it will help you be more professional, to have this conscientiousness of where they have been in the last few months and their mission, vision, and their unique traits. So I think that those are some first advice.
Yeah, Katya, you mentioned some really wonderful things, especially around accessibility and kind of communication up front. Like, it's a good point that this is remote, right? Like, we are virtual by nature because it allows you to connect with people in lots of different places. Elizabeth in Denver, Rebecca in Wilmington, Katya, you were in Maine, and Jean was in Alaska. So we're spanning across lots of different geographic regions, and just keeping that in mind, and being pretty open about communicating your expectations or needs. I think that's wonderful advice for folks getting started. We've had lots of questions, and I know we're coming up on time here with 5 minutes or so remaining. But I want to pose maybe a couple of the questions that have come through. And I know, Elizabeth, you've done a great job, and Rebecca, you're very agile in terms of being able to also look at the chat here. So I appreciate you jumping in. But one that I saw come through, I think that I'll address, just more of a logistic piece. Okay, I might be back.
Yeah, you're back.
Apologies, everyone. I don't know where I left off in terms of my my spiel
You
about
were
hiring someone.
you were just about to state the question, so I don't think we heard which question you were answering.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. There was a question about continuing your relationship with a volunteer after you've worked together, and I wanted to highlight that because I think there's such a wonderful opportunity there to do that. And I want to keep it kind of open. We do ask that our volunteers don't request payment for support. It's pro bono by nature, so that is a community guideline we have firmly enforced. And if you ever run into any issues with that, please reach out to us. But we encourage continued relationships. And if you want to post more projects and work together on future ones, you're definitely able to do that. Just come through us. So thank you again for the patience with that. One question that I wanted, and I think it looks like Katya, you might have to go, which is totally fine. Please jump in as we're. If you had any parting words, go ahead and share. No. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining. Thank you. And we'll let you go ahead. It's okay. You're good. Thank you so much. We'll pose one question just finally to Rebecca and Elizabeth from the group. You had touched on that piece of the contracts, but I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit about kind of confirming deliverables and if you did any refining of the project scope when you started working together.
I think that, we focused on the project that we initially discussed. And then, we kind of stuck to that. And I think so. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm always doing something. So I don't even remember.
I think, yeah, like we dug in a little, like we started with the original project, but as we had talked, like we talked about some of the donor angle too, because I did about 5 years that was like donor specific communication. And of course I've continued to do that in my nonprofit world. So we also worked on a donor letter for someone to share with their friends. That was like, we had sort of already started with the messaging, and then it was an example of like bringing that messaging to life. And then, yeah, things got busy and from there, but I think it all started with like, we knew exactly what we were going to work on to start with because Rebecca had it all scoped out to begin with. So, but I definitely would say, like, for my other nonprofit that I worked with, it was a little more nebulous. They wanted messaging, but didn't really have the deliverables in place. So for me, as someone who's done it for my own nonprofit, for other pro bono, like our conversation was around, okay, what are the deliverables that get you to your goal? What is we had a meeting with all the stakeholders to really talk about their vision. And then I said, and here's sort of what the deliverable will look like. Is that right? Is that helpful for you? And they were able to say yes. So I think that's important, just to like make sure you're on the same page. But the more clear you can be upfront, the easier it is for me as a volunteer to know kind of like the scope of what I'm taking on. As Rebecca said, I was also trying to get a job. I was crying in my Cheerios a little bit, but this helped me cry slightly less. So
I love that. Thanks for and Rebecca, do you have anything to add?
No, I just wanted to thank you for going beyond the call of duty. I was very clear with that, what I asked for. And then additionally, she found capacity to help with the donation letter too. And yeah, we are always, I think the thing is that what might be hard for nonprofits to do to clarify the acts is that we have so much need. We're often serving communities that have such great need, and we internalize that and we feel that. And so that sometimes does make it very hard to take big needs and say, okay, I need to isolate this part because this part is something that this person can do. And we're going to have to take yes, we need to get these talking points made. And yes, we also need funding. And yes, we also need 10 other things. But being very clear with your ask to, if you can parcel out the needs that you have that seem enormous and just break it down, nonprofits, break it down to give a clear ask to one person to meet one need, and then maybe another need if they have the capacity. That will help this project work well. And you know, I put my information in the chat because if you're inspired by the project that I'm doing and you have a skill, chances are I need it. So yeah, it's just, I want to be very clear with what I'm asking. And so I think that's something that nonprofits, you know, that's something that we have to work on. That's something that we can bring to the table.
Thank you so much both for answering that question there. I want to thank everyone for joining and for hearing from our panelists today. I think there are two main opportunities where you can, if you're looking to get connected to. We'll have a nonprofit orientation tomorrow led by Jen, and we have monthly volunteer office hours. So if you have questions about how to get started, those are open for you to sign up. And also just get started. As our panelists alluded to, it's low risk. Try it out, and if we can help you and iterate through the process, please reach out. But thank you again so much for taking the time. We'll share the recording and any follow-up resources after the event, and really appreciate our panelists for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for
having
us.
Bye, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.